gentle light from a laptop screen lights up Emma's face as she looks through her grandmother's digital records. Rain patters on the window of her apartment, making a calm rhythm that does not match the tight feeling in her shoulders. She has been doing this for hours, organizing family pictures for a memorial project since her grandmother died 3 weeks ago. "Just a few more folders," she says quietly, rubbing her tired eyes. The clock on her desk shows 2:17 a.m. Emma knows she should go to sleep, but something makes her keep scrolling. Maybe it is the sadness, or maybe it is the odd comfort from these pieces of her family's past. Her mouse stops over a folder named simply 1892. Her curiosity grew. She clicks. A group of scanned pictures appear. Sepia-colored looks into a world that is long gone. Men with large mustaches and women in detailed dresses look seriously at the camera, but one small picture catches her eye. A wedding photo. Unlike the others, the bride seems to be smiling, which is rare in Victorian photography when long exposure times made holding expressions hard. Emma clicks to make the image bigger. The bride stands tall in a beautiful white dress with a good-looking groom beside her. The bride's smile looks truly happy, her eyes bright even with the photographic limits of the time. In her hands, she holds a detailed bouquet of flowers. "Who were you?" Emma whispers, moving closer to the screen. She checks the file name. Elizabeth and Thomas Blackwood. Wedding 1892. JPEG. The names sound a little familiar. Looking through her notes, Emma finds the link. Elizabeth was her great-great-grandmother's sister, a faraway family member, but still family. Emma looks at the photo more carefully. Something about it feels a little wrong, though she cannot say exactly what. Maybe it is just the odd feeling of looking at someone from your family who lived over 100 years ago. The bride's bouquet especially gets her attention, a detailed arrangement that looks unusually dark in some spots. Emma, who does photography herself sometimes, wonders if she can improve the image to see the details more clearly. She opens the photo in her editing program and starts to work, raising the contrast and changing the levels. As the image quality gets better, Emma zooms in on the bouquet. What she first thought were just shadows among the flowers starts to look different. "What is that?" she murmurs, leaning closer. She keeps adjusting the improvement, focusing especially on the bride's bouquet. The shapes become clearer, and Emma's breath catches in her throat. There, tucked among what look like roses and lilies, is what unmistakably looks like a small dried human hand. Emma pulls back from the screen, her heart beating fast. She blinks hard and looks again. Sure, she must be wrong, but the improved image is clear now. Partly hidden inside the detailed flower arrangement is what appears to be a tiny dried hand. The fingers curled inward like dry twigs. "This can't be real," Emma whispers, her voice shaking. She zooms out to see the full picture again. The bride's smile now seems less happy and more knowing. The groom's face, which she first saw as proud, now looks tense, his eyes looking slightly to the side instead of straight at the camera. Emma sits back in her chair, her mind racing. Could this be some strange Victorian mourning? Custom she has never heard of? A photographic mistake or damage to the original or something darker? She reaches for her phone, then stops. It is the middle of the night. Who would she even call? Instead, she opens her laptop browser and starts searching for information about Victorian wedding traditions, photography methods from the 1890s, and anything about the Blackwood family. Hours pass as Emma falls into a research hole. She learns that the Blackwoods were once an important family in the small town of Ravenscraft, where her grandmother grew up. Thomas Blackwood had been a successful businessman working in fabrics, while his bride Elizabeth came from old money. Their wedding was apparently a big social event. As dawn breaks, Emma finally finds something useful, an online archive of the Ravenscraft Chronicle, the local newspaper from that time. She looks for mentions of the Blackwood wedding and finds a short notice dated June 7, 1892. The marriage of Mr. Thomas Blackwood to Miss Elizabeth Montgomery was celebrated yesterday at St. Paul's Church. The bride was stunning in white silk and Brussels lace. The happy couple left right away for a honeymoon trip across Europe. Nothing unusual there. Emma keeps searching and finds another mention 3 weeks later. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Blackwood have returned from their trip and moved into Blackwood Manor. She keeps scrolling through later copies of the paper and sees something strange. Despite the Blackwood's social importance, there are very few mentions of them after their wedding. It is as if they slowly disappeared from public life. Then almost 2 years later, Emma finds a small piece on page 6. Ravenscraft Chronicle, April L. 12th, 1894. Mrs. Elizabeth Blackwood, wife of Thomas Blackwood, was buried yesterday after a short illness. She leaves behind her husband and no children. She died less than 2 years after the wedding, Emma murmurs. She feels a chill, even with the warm morning light now coming through her window. More searching gives little information about what happened to Thomas after his wife's death, except for a short mention that he sold Blackwood Manor in 1895 and was thought to have moved to Boston. Emma returns to the wedding picture, staring at the improved image of the bouquet. The tiny hand seems to mock her with its impossible presence. She needs more information, and suddenly remembers that her grandmother had kept old family journals and papers in a chest in the attic of her house, which Emma's parents are now getting ready to sell. She makes a quick call to her mother. "Mom, I need to look through Grandma's papers in the attic. It's for the memorial project," she explains, not mentioning the upsetting discovery. "Of course, honey, we haven't started sorting through those yet. Come by any time." 3 hours later, Emma is kneeling in front of an old cedar chest in her grandmother's dusty attic. The house feels strangely quiet without her grandmother there. Emma lifts the heavy lid of the chest, letting out the smell of old paper and lavender sachets. Inside are stacks of journals, letters and documents, some dating back to the mid-1800s. Emma starts carefully going through them, looking for anything about Elizabeth or Thomas Blackwood. After an hour of searching, she finds a small leather-bound journal with the name Margaret Montgomery pressed on the cover. Montgomery. T. Hat was Elizabeth's family name, Emma remembers. She opens the journal carefully, its binding cracking with age. The handwriting is delicate and flowing, typical of educated women from that time. Emma quickly realizes that Margaret was Elizabeth's younger sister. The journal entries start in 1891 and go through 1894. Emma turns to entries around the time of Elizabeth's wedding in June 1892. Margaret describes the preparations with expected excitement, but there is a feeling of worry in her writing. June 1st, 1892. Elizabeth's wedding is only 5 days away. Mother is very busy making sure every detail is perfect. Elizabeth seemed oddly calm for a bride. When I asked if she was nervous, she just smiled and said, "Everything has been arranged exactly as it needs to be. There is something in her eyes lately that I do not know, a hardness that was not there before she met Thomas." Emma keeps reading, finding nothing unusual in the description of the wedding itself. But an entry from 2 weeks after the ceremony catches her attention. June 23rd, 1892. Elizabeth and Thomas have come back from Europe. I visited them at Blackwood Manor today and was surprised by how changed the place has become. Thomas has had the whole east wing closed off with no explanation given. Elizabeth saw me in the drawing room, but would not let me see the rest of the house. She seems different somehow, thinner, paler, yet there is a strong feeling about her that is very unsettling. When I asked about her health, she laughed in a way I have never heard from her before and said, "I have never been better, dear sister. Marriage has opened doors I never knew existed." Before I left, she pressed a strange arm into my hand, a tiny silver thing shaped like a hand. She insisted I keep it with me always for protection. Protection from what she would not say. Emma's skin tingles as she reads about the hand-shaped charm. She keeps turning pages, finding more and more upsetting entries. September 8th, 1892. Elizabeth has not been seen in town for almost a month. Thomas says she is unwell with female troubles, but I think it is something else. When I visited today, I heard crying from upstairs, though Thomas said it was just a servant girl. The house smelled of strange herbs and something metallic, like blood. I left a note for Elizabeth, but have gotten no reply. December 12th, 1892. Christmas is coming, but there is little joy in it for me. Elizabeth finally agreed to see me yesterday. I barely knew my own sister. She's gotten so thin, and her eyes seem almost colorless now. The drawing room was full of odd items, dried flowers and herbs hanging from the ceiling, strange symbols drawn on bits of paper. When I asked about them, she said they were insurance. She would not say more. As I was leaving, I saw a small wooden box on the mantel. It seemed to be moving a little, as if something inside was shifting. Elizabeth saw me looking and rushed to cover it with a cloth. "Some things are not for sisterly eyes." "Yes," she said, and her voice was as cold as January frost. The entries become less frequent after that. as if Margaret visited less often. Then a long entry from April 1894 catches Emma's eye. April 11th, 1894. Elizabeth is gone. They say it was fever that took her, but I know better. What fever leaves such marks on the wrists and throat? What fever makes one's hair turn white overnight? Thomas let no one see her body before burial, saying there was a risk of spreading sickness. I managed only a quick look as they closed the coffin enough to see that her hands were tied with silver wire. For protection, Thomas said when I questioned him. Protection for whom? I demanded. He would not look at me. After the burial, I went back to Blackwood Manor to get Elizabeth's personal things. Thomas was surprisingly helpful, though he said certain items had been buried with her. In her writing desk, I found a hidden space containing a journal. I have taken it, though I fear what secrets it may hold. Thomas must never know I have it. Emma's heart races as she reads these words. She quickly searches through the chest, looking for any sign of Elizabeth's journal that Margaret mentioned. After nearly an hour of careful sorting, she finds a smaller, more worn journal wrapped in cloth at the very bottom of the chest. The name Elizabeth is barely visible on the damaged cover. With shaking hands, Emma opens it. Many pages have been damaged by water or purposely covered with ink, but enough can be read to put together an upsetting story. The early entries are what you might expect from a young woman looking forward to marriage, hopes and plans for the future, thoughts about her fiancé. But shortly before the wedding, the tone changes a lot. May 12, 1892. I have made my decision. The old woman in the woods confirmed what I thought. The Montgomery bloodline carries the gift, though it has gotten weaker with each generation. In me, she says, it flows stronger than it has in 100 years, but to fully wake, it needs sacrifice. She has told me what must be done. ND, given the needed items. Thomas suspects nothing. He sees only the obedient bride he thinks he has bought with his money. May 30th, 1892. It is ready. The charm is complete. I have woven it carefully into the design for my bouquet. No one will notice among the flowers and ribbons. The old woman warned it must be kept close during the ceremony for the binding to work. After that, it can be safely stored until needed. Thomas keeps making plans for our future, not knowing that I have made plans of my own. Several pages are missing or too damaged to read. Emma skips ahead to what looks like an entry from soon after the honeymoon. July 3rd, 1892. We have returned to Ravenscraft. Thomas is already asserting his control over the household, but he will soon learn. The ritual was successful. I felt the power rush through me at the moment of our vows. The sacrifice has started its change. Soon it will be ready for the next stage. I keep it in a box of rosewood lined with silver. It stirs sometimes, looking for what it has lost. Emma feels sick as she reads, her mind trying to make sense of Elizabeth's mysterious writings. The entries become more random and upsetting. August 18th, 1892. Thomas found the box today. I should have been more careful. He tried to destroy it, throwing it into the fire, but I got it back. The flames had no effect. Another sign that the charm is growing in power, but Thomas has seen too much. I had to use the sleeping potion on him. When he wakes, he will remember nothing. The old woman taught me how to make sure he stays silent. October 31st, 1892. Samin. The veil is thin tonight. I performed the second ritual in the east wing. The charm has grown a low T. What started as just essence has taken form. I can feel its hunger. It needs food that common food cannot give. Thomas is getting suspicious again. He has threatened to send for a doctor to check my mental state. He does not understand that I have never been more clear-headed. The entries become more broken and hard to follow after this point. Emma struggles to follow Elizabeth's increasingly disturbed story. There are mentions of feedings and growth, and the being in the east wing. One of the last readable entries chills Emma to the bone. March 15th, 1894. It is almost complete. The charm has grown beyond the limits of the box. It now looks like a child of maybe 4 years, though no human child ever had such features. It speaks to me in the voice of all my ancestors. It has promised me eternal life once the final ritual is complete. Thomas tried to interfere again. He found us during the midnight feeding and became violent. I had no choice but to let my creation defend itself. The wound on his arm festers. He raves with fever. Soon I will be free of him completely. then nothing will stop the completion of what I have started. The final entry, dated April 9th, 1894, just 2 days before Elizabeth's reported death, is barely readable. The handwriting is wild and spread across the page. It has turned against me. I don't understand. Everything was done according to the instructions. The sacrifices were made in the right order, but it grows too quickly now, and its hunger has no end. It is no longer happy with what I give. Last night it tried to feed on me as I slept. I have locked it in the east wing, but the doors will not hold it for long. Thomas is gone, whether dead or ran away, I do not know. I am alone with my creation. I hear it scratching at the walls, coming closer. I have written to Margaret, but I fear help will come too late. If anyone finds this journal, burn it. Then burn Blackwood Manor to the ground. Let nothing survive. Emma closes the journal, her hands shaking badly. She returns to her laptop and opens the wedding picture again, staring at the improved image of the bride's bouquet. The small, dried hand visible among the flowers takes on a terrifying new meaning. She used it as a charm, Emma whispers to the empty attic. But what exactly was it? She goes back to the journal, carefully looking at the damaged and missing pages for any more clues. On the inside back cover, she finds a small pocket holding a folded piece of paper. It appears to be a page torn from a much older book. The text is written in a language she does not know, but at the bottom is a rough drawing of what looks like a bouquet, with something hidden inside it along with English notes and what she recognizes as Elizabeth's handwriting. The sacrifice must be fresh, infant preferred. Preserve the hand only. Bind with silver and herbs. Keep close during sacred vows. The life essence will transfer through marriage bonds, creating the vessel for rebirth. Emma drops the paper as if burned, a wave of disgust washing over her. The meaning is too horrible to think about. Had Elizabeth Montgomery Blackwood actually killed a child and used its hand as some kind of occult charm in her wedding bouquet? She forces herself to think logically. This could all be the crazy writings of a mentally ill woman from the 1890s. People back then had little understanding of mental disorders. Maybe Elizabeth had suffered from some form of psychosis that showed itself in these upsetting delusions. But then, how to explain the hand clearly visible in the photograph? Photography in that time was simple but honest. There were no digital changes or Photoshop. Emma gathers the journals and goes downstairs. Her mother is in the kitchen, making lunch. "Did you find what you needed, honey?" she asks. Emma hesitates. "Mom, did Grandma ever mention anyone named Elizabeth Blackwood? She would have been a distant relative." Her mother thinks for a moment. "Not that I remember specifically, though she did used to tell stories about a wicked bride from the family history. I always thought they were just scary stories to keep us kids in line." She laughs lightly. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about some old pictures I found," Emma says, not wanting to worry her mother with the upsetting discovery. "Do you know if Blackwood Manor still exists?" "Oh, that old place burned down decades ago," her mother replies casually. "Grandma used to point out where it had stood when we drove past. Nothing there now but an empty lot. The town thinks it is cursed or something equally silly. No one has built on it in over 100 years. Emma nods, trying to look only mildly interested, while her mind races. "I think I'll drive out to Ravenscraft tomorrow, visit some of the places Grandma mentioned for the memorial project." That night Emma can hardly sleep. The image of the dried hand in the bridal bouquet haunts her along with pieces of Elizabeth's upsetting journal entries. When she does fall asleep, her dreams are filled with white-dressed brides with hollow eyes and bouquets that wiggle and move on their own. The next morning, Emma drives the 2 hours to Ravenscraft, a small town that seems to have changed little in the past century. Her first stop is the local historical society in a Victorian building on the main street. Inside, she finds an elderly man arranging displays in a glass case. He looks up as she comes in, giving a friendly smile. "Good morning. Welcome to the Ravenscraft Historical Society. I'm Walter Jenkins, the curator. What brings you to our little museum today?" "I'm researching my family history," Emma explains. "Specifically, I'm interested in the Blackwood family who lived here in the 1890s. Walter's